Shake it off. They may hate you, but shake it off. You may have been abused, but shake it off. You may have been left by yourself. Shake it off. The burden may be heavy. Shake it off. The road may be rough. Shake it off. Shake it off. Shake it off.
He's the greatest fisherman of souls.
And he relates to you. And it seems like every time he preaches, every message is geared right to you.
I just came by tonight to let you know that I see you in the future and you look much better than you look right now.
I was just so impressed with his teaching and training ability. Just knew that this man had it going on.
Bishop Blake has a compassion for people.
He doesn't have to know you to love you. There is no one he feels too good to take time with.
You're a child of God. You are a creation of Almighty God. And if God made you, God never makes a mistake.
With Christ as his guide and complete devotion in his heart, Bishop Blake not only talks of a spirit-filled life, he walks it as well.
Well, you can't tell people to do better if you're not doing it yourself. You can't tell people to dream and go after your dreams if you're not dreaming and going after your dreams.
The only man my mother ever said, that's what I want you to be like as you grow older, was Charles Blake. He was the perfectly flawless person. He'll always be one of my heroes.
Charles E. Blake's the baddest dude out here. Hands down. No contest. Slam dunk. Oh, he's the man.
Born in Little Rock, Arkansas, to a family steeped in the Pentecostal tradition, Charles was one of two sons expected to inherit the keys to his father's kingdom.
Well, I'm third generation Pentecostal. I'm third generation Church of God in Christ. And my father, of course, pastored in Arkansas over many parishes and congregations.
His father was a legendary preacher within our organization.
My dad was a busy, successful pastor. He traveled a lot. He loved his family. He was a great provider. But the day-to-day responsibility for the running of the house and the rearing of the children, and even the spiritual nurture of the children, was my mom's responsibility. Just a real sweet person. My brother and I have a great relationship. He was 3 years older than I was. He's quite the adventurous one. I'm more like the bookworm. I'm sure he's had a much more exciting life than I have.
In the 40s, Arkansas was a hotbed of social unrest, and it was during this time that young Charles got his first bitter taste of the racial divide.
I really didn't think about it, nor was I aware of it, until one day when the Allies won the war. The nation went into the streets to celebrate the victory. And so my family and I driving, my brother and I were in the back seat and we were waving our flags out the window. A white family pulled up beside our car and their son reached out and snatched the flag out of my hand. And I complained to my dad, "Dad, that boy snatched my flag, get my flag back." And my dad said, "Be quiet, son, be quiet." And so I began to understand that I did not have the privileges of citizenship like they did, that my rights could be snatched away from me and that there was nothing that I could do about it. But it had a tremendous impact upon me in terms of my self-esteem, my confidence, my boldness, my sense of worth.
When Charles was 7 years old, his father got called to move his church and family from Little Rock, Arkansas, to San Diego, California.
The schools were already integrated, and in many of the experiences, I was exposed to a majority of white associates. A guy by the name of Richard used to beat me up every day. One day I was trying to get home, and Richard was there in the middle of the sidewalk, and he knocked my books out of my hands and started pushing me. And finally, out of desperation, with tears in my eyes, I reached down and picked up the books that he'd knocked out of my hand and just threw a punch and ran. And from that day forward, I never had any more trouble out of Richard.
There was one place Charles never had to prove himself, his father's church.
Our house was right next door to the church. It meant that there were many times as many people in our house as there were in the church. And I'll never forget, as a child, I was having a difference with another young person, and they happened to be over at my house. And I said, hey, get out of my house. He said, oh, this is not your house. This is our house. Our church owns this house, and you can't put me out.
Charles's mother noticed something special in him and pushed him to find his path.
My mother said, Charles, Jesus, when he was 12 years old, set out on his mission for life. And so she said to me, you're 12 years old, now it's time for you to make some life decisions and some life commitments. I did not commit to preaching or being a minister at that point in time, but I do remember the age of 12 as a very significant moment when I made a commitment to Jesus Christ.
While other kids his age were having fun being teenagers, Charles was preparing to live a life of service.
I was a youth worker in the church and trying to do those things that were God's will. And so I think that I had reached a level of commitment and involvement that really equated ministry. I just spontaneously said to my dad in the middle of the service, I'd like to preach my first sermon. In a way, surprised me to hear myself say it. But a few days later, after much study of the Word, I shared my first sermon.
My first words as a preacher were, previous to the time that this text was written.
I meant to say written. And of course, they laughed at me. A tear came down my cheek. I went on with the rest of my message. By the end of my message, tears were going down their cheeks.
But one day, he was told words from a teacher that threatened to crush his dreams of becoming a successful minister forever.
We came to the 12th grade, and there was a baccalaureate service that had a high level of student participation. And some of my friends who knew me recommended to the speech teacher that they would like to hear me be one of the student speakers. She said, no, Charles Blake can't speak. Charles Blake will never be a public speaker. And so I didn't speak. I'm sure it had a negative impact upon me emotionally, but I think it made me all the more determined that I would make her wrong.
After finishing high school and more determined than ever, Blake had the opportunity to preach the national circuit and earn an immediate income. But instead, he chose to invest in his future through education.
There were quite a few of his contemporaries that chose not to go to college, but chose to go on the revival road. It must have been difficult to continue to go to college and lug books when your friends are out on the road, evangelizing, getting a name.
Charles packed his bags, leaving California and his father's church for Atlanta, Georgia, where he learned that being black can mean having real power.
My school was almost totally black. Black professors and university presidents, and that did something for my ego that had a literally transforming effect upon me. I never had occupied a student body office until I went to Atlanta.
His school, ITC, elected him to be the student body president.
And I had an opportunity to lead our student body to Selma and to Montgomery. We were marching. We came before Jim Clark and his dogs and the patrolmen, and they said, go back to the church. At that point in time, we literally thought that the police were going to attack us and that the dogs were going to be released upon us. We were so caught up in the idea of liberation and freedom, we were willing to really die for what we were fighting for. And once you've come to something that's important enough that you're willing to die for it, it puts the rest of your life in perspective.
Blake's intelligence and charisma not only made him popular with his classmates, but also with the ladies.
He was a very disciplined student. Monday through Thursday, no kind of, playing around. But on Friday, we would date, find some of the beautiful Georgia belles. He didn't approach women as if they were just someone to use. When we would double date, he would escort them like they were fragile china. They were not used to that kind of treatment. A lot of men take women for granted, but he didn't.
But once he laid eyes on a lady named May Lawrence, his heart was captured and the search was over.
I met Bishop Blake in Denver, Colorado, and I was there at a youth meeting with my parents. Someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "May I speak with you, please?" And lo and behold, that was Charles Blake.
He didn't know how I knew May Blake. May Blake was considered to be one of the most beautiful women. She was even voted in our high school as the most beautiful girl.
I spoke to some of my girlfriends, and I said, "You know what? He wants to take me out, but I don't think I'm going to go." And they said, "Do you know who that is?"
When I finished talking about May, he was already, overwhelmed. And when I finished telling him what I knew about her, he was ready to fly to Detroit.
I traveled to Detroit several times and courted her, and we became engaged, and after a year we married.
She was such a tremendous compliment to him, and has to be a lot of the reason that he has become the person he is today.
With the hopes to start a family and build his career, in 1969, Charles returned to San Diego with his new wife and began working again with his father.
May was pregnant by the time we left Atlanta, and Kim was born the following Christmas. She was our first child. Kim was Daddy's girl. She's the only girl that I have. Those were tough days for us, but they were wonderful days because we had the newness of relationship and the freshness of family and marriage. And as young people, we toughed it out and just had a wonderful early season in life.
And one day, he received a call that would change his life forever.
At the end of 3 years, I was invited to take a church in the city of Los Angeles, West Angeles Church. My dad offered me an increase in salary to $95 a week if I would stay with him rather than going to Los Angeles, but I felt it was time for me to go. Living in San Diego, I was not very well known in the city of Los Angeles, and they were reluctant about this stranger coming in to assume leadership.
The bishop brought me to the church that Sunday morning, placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm going to assign this young man as pastor of this church." 7 men stood and said, "Bishop, we don't want to hear it." The bishop said, "You 7 men sit down." They would not sit down. So the bishop said, "Everybody stand." He prayed the benediction, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "It's yours, my boy," and walked out the side door. There were some who opposed for 3 solid years. We were in court. For 3 solid years, there was controversy. For one period of time, I had a bodyguard that would meet me in the morning, be with me all day, take me home at night because of the physical threats that came against me.
Possibly it was good that I did not have just a totally harmonious situation because it developed qualities of courage and persistence that assist me even now.
The Bible says in Romans 8:31, if God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all.
That first year in West Angeles, all that the church brought in was $12,000 total. That meant that my family had to live on that money. The church employees had to be paid. And so during that period, I was not much better off economically than I had been when my father was paying me $75 a week.
He used to get up, play the piano, direct the choir, and then preach.
He would lead the congregation from the piano, then get up off the piano and run over to the pulpit and preach from the pulpit. And he did it all.
But listen, if we can keep up a whole lot of racket at the football game and at the baseball game and at the sight of the Rolling Stones and scream at the sight of their favorite entertainer, then how much more should we be able to scream because of what Jesus has done for us?
As Charles and May struggled to build the trust and acceptance of their new church family, their own family was growing.
Charles Blake II was my second child. He was born in 1969.
I don't think that God could have given me a better father. I wonder, as a son, or just as a man, can I not measure up to what he's done, but measure up to the kind of man that he has been.
Their third child, Lawrence Champion Blake, was born soon after.
At a young age, 7 and 8, you know, being just about forced into church all your life. Sunday school, Bible band, YPWW, everything. In my thinking, I'm thinking that, is this my life or his life?
To balance family and professional responsibilities became increasingly difficult as time went on.
I remember feeling like his call was so great. There were so many people that depended on him. I just thought that what he had to do was so big that as a daughter, I felt that any problems that I would cause would take away from him.
As responsibilities increased and expanded, it became more and more difficult to carve out that family time.
I became aware of the fact that I had to share my dad. People walking up to him in stores or him waving to people as we would drive down the street. And I noticed that they weren't just waving and saying hi to everyone else.
But I've always tried to put priority on my children and give them some of my time. They might claim that I did not give them enough time, and they might be right. But I tried to give them as much time as I could.
But not all of Blake's children reacted well to being a preacher's child.
I noticed that people were different when I got to public school. To make it plain, they talked about me. Choir boy, church boy, you know, and honestly, I just wanted to be a regular person. I wanted to get as far away from spirituality as I could.
Today, certainly I come with a heart full of gratitude that the Lord has blessed me to be here in his house.
The word was out. West Angeles was the place to be, and they underwent a member explosion that Blake could barely contain.
Well, we were up to 3 services in our small church, and every year we were doubling in size. Our congregation would double. And so in 1976, we started looking for a new site, a new location to which we could move.
We incidentally need at least 3 acres to really do and to build the kind of church that the Lord wants us to build.
When we started on Crenshaw building the first church, there were many people who really doubted that we had the resources and the will and the ingenuity to do it. And so there were naysayers who said it would never happen.
And I believe that God's church ought to be in the very best location, on the most visible site.
We occupied and remodeled an old furniture store. It was a huge building, but it was a furniture store, and it was boarded up and dilapidated with holes in the roof. And we purchased those buildings and we remodeled them and came up with what I think was a very beautiful church campus.
Someone said that will never be a church, but it's not a bad church.
Under the leadership of Pastor Charles Blake, West Angeles Church was thriving. But on the eve of his elevation to the position of bishop, Charles Blake received news that would give his life a new perspective.
The doctor discovered a tumor on the brain stem coming out of my brain, going toward my ear.
And it took place at a very critical period of my life when I was also being considered for the office of bishop. I was scheduled for surgery on the day that the denominational committee was coming in to consult with the elders of the area regarding who should become their bishop.
And the doctor, by God's grace, folded my ear forward, went in through the ear canal, went into the brain cavity, went down into the nerve canal, clipped out that nerve without damaging any other nerve. And in 3 solid weeks, I was back in the pulpit praising God.
I became bishop that night, and that was a miracle.
I remember when the way was dark at night. Jesus came in and made me feel all right.
Now as Bishop Blake and First Lady May Lawrence Blake, their church was in its prime. But their focus on the church kept them hidden from the troubles that lurked in the pathway of their children.
Honestly, I wanted my own life and my own identity. First chance I got, I kind of took off.
It's not rebellion for other children to go out there and find their way and to find out who they are, but if we do it, it becomes, oh, you're rebelling.
Anxious to spread their wings, Blake's sons, Larry and Charles Jr., used their opportunity of going away to college in Atlanta to experiment with a lifestyle that forced them to their knees.
Just being in a new state no parents, no law. I just went nuts.
I was in seminary at the time, but the amount of freedom that we had been given, we ran ramshot with it all over Atlanta.
Sometimes my wife and I were simply naive. We felt that when they went away to college and went away to school, that they were going to study and behave themselves. But we found out that there were certain periods of time that one or two of them were kind of into things that we would have said, don't do that, don't go there.
I got involved in gangs and alcohol. I had a group of bad friends that I dealt with, and you name it, I was trying to be involved in it.
He was all about it. In some ways, I was about it too, but I'm his big brother. I should have been keeping a stronger hand on my household.
Honestly, I thought that God was my father's God. You know, he blesses him, treats him right, and, you know, he doesn't have anything to do with me. I asked God, you know, if I could see a biblical type of miracle, it'll be so much easier to believe in you. 2 days after that prayer, my friend and I were leaving my apartment, and my friend opened the door. First thing I noticed was a guy charging at me with a .45.
When the policeman first told me, your brother's been shot, I'm like, oh man, where is he? Where is he at, man? He's all right, you know, where is he?
We were here in the city of Los Angeles and received a report that our son had been shot.
I said, Larry, who? And they said, well, your son, Larry. I said, no. He said, school.
I had a quarter-size hole, an inch in the center of my chest, an inch below my neck. My first thought was, tell my mother I love her. I said bye to life, and I just really knew that that was it.
I literally went into shock, and you won't believe this. That was such a traumatic thing for me. I laid down and went to sleep. That was the way my body dealt with that. It just shut down.
The ambulance got me in. They started speeding off, and they were hitting the speed bumps. But you know, I was thinking, just slow down. I mean, it's no reason to be speeding.
We rushed, caught a plane, went to Atlanta. And when we arrived at the hospital, he was just semi-conscious, but there were tubes all over his body.
When I saw him, I just couldn't really deal with it. And my first thought was, Lord, why? We've done everything that you wanted us to do. We have reared those 3 children in your will. Why?
I felt like I had just let them down. Just me wanting to have fun resulted in me getting shot. It might have been about 28, 29 hours later when I woke back up.
And the amazing thing was that after being shot point blank, center chest, with a .45 slug that should have killed him, he walked out of the hospital in 6 days.
In 6 days.
Not only did I see the miracle that I was asking for, but I also was able to see that God thought I was important enough to bring me back from something like that.
After his season of testing God's love, Larry makes a commitment to the ministry and eventually becomes a deacon in his father's church.
If God could love me enough to let me remain here after I was so foul and bad, I have to give him my life. I have to serve him.
You go through whatever the adversity and the trouble might be, and God brings you through it, and you do it not having a nervous breakdown and overcome by depression. But we have a hope because we know that he that hath begun a good work in us will perform it.
After his family's brush with death, Bishop Blake takes his strengthened faith and wisdom and deposits it into his ministry.
It equips us to be better able to minister to other individuals when they are hurting and when they go through their crisis. And our victory in that experience can certainly be, and has been, an encouragement to others as they've gone through trials.
Yes.
And in 1991, he was ready to stand in the spiritual gap for one of his congregants who was forced to face a life-altering crisis on the world stage.
Because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers today. When you think about 16 years ago and dealing with HIV and the whole news, and Bishop was there praying with us, praying for us, making sure that I was going to be okay, and I think that, again, that's what you get with him.
The most significant and profound dimension of relationships is when an individual confronts a decisive or critical period in their lives, and another individual is allowed to come in close at that time to provide support, to provide concern, to provide love.
Him bringing peace of mind to myself, him telling me that God is going to keep me and I'm going to be okay. And I think that was more powerful than actually the medicine, me working out. That was just a spiritual moment, a time that I needed and Cookie needed. We'll never forget that time, that moment, because it was special.
Bishop Blake's reputation for standing and delivering has attracted the likes of many Hollywood celebrities.
Sometimes when you look in the audience and you'll see a Whitney Houston, you look in the audience and you'll see a Denzel Washington.
Being in Los Angeles, you see so many people from Hollywood come, so they try to categorize Bishop as sort of being Hollywood. But it's not that. It's just his effective ministry. It draws whomever. It can draw the most powerful, and it can draw just the average person.
They come to worship. They come to participate in our services. And so they're not to us celebrities. They're just people who love God or who need God.
We're able to worship and not worry about, the press or anyone else.
They're just people who have weaknesses and flaws and who have needs, just as everyone else does.
We're not treated any differently than anybody else at the church. And then Cookie wouldn't have it any other way anyway.
West Angeles is once again enjoying a season of amazing growth. And once again, it's up to Bishop Blake to make room large enough to hold the blessing.
I've learned over many years that you do not build for the fun of it. You build because you have to. We were at 5 services per Sunday, and people were lined up a block trying to come to the next service, and we were 1,000 seats overflow. Even with my boundless energy, I could not do any more than I was doing, and our choirs and our staff was really overburdened, and the only answer was a larger facility. We had an architect to design something for us to accommodate us, and his plans would have cost $100 million, and we went back to the drawing board, and we asked an architect to do something for $40 million, and we ended up building the cathedral, which cost substantially more.
While he's not a minister known for his bling, some question the need for Blake to spend such an exorbitant amount of money on a house of God in an area where so many suffer financially.
The billions of dollars that are invested in Las Vegas casinos and hotels, if we don't complain about their doing much, much more for what they pursue, then I can't understand why anybody would complain that we would invest in those things that are important to our community and to our world.
Why not right here where we are? Improve where we are. Why take a cathedral out in the suburbs? The people attending the church live right here in the ghetto and beyond the ghetto.
This is our church. This is our community. This is our responsibility.
Unfortunately, minorities, we cheapen ourselves and think that we shouldn't have a church like that in our community. Because what we forget that when a church like that comes within our community, then everybody benefits. Property value goes up. It makes it more desirable to live in those neighborhoods. Now look at all the development that's going on around there that never would have happened if Bishop Blake didn't build a new church.
Everyone talks about the drugs and the gangs, but now there's something positive that you see coming out of South Central. And so I think that's why Bishop is strategically placed here in South Central Los Angeles. God
gave him a great plan. He hit it out the park one more time.
I command you, Satan, in the name of the Lord, take up your weapons and flee.
With the help of major celebrity donations and a decade-long fundraising effort, West Angeles collects $65 million for the purchase of their new gold-laden cathedral.
In the name of the Lord, take up your weapons and flee. For the Lord
boasting over 24,000 members, West Angeles is one of the nation's largest megachurches.
A megachurch is not a megachurch just to be a megachurch, but it is a megachurch to do effective things in its community. Jesus fed the hungry. Jesus ministered to people who were hurting. He healed people who were sick. And that is what his church ought to be striving to do.
And although many megachurches have been criticized for only focusing on wealth and self-help ministries, West Angeles has a different testimony.
We have 80 ministries at West Angeles. We have a counseling center. We have a school that has existed since 1976. We have welfare to work programs. We just believe that in every way that we can serve the needs of the people in our community, that we must do it.
Blake also takes his ministry abroad to address the HIV/AIDS pandemic that is wiping out millions of people throughout Africa. And he is one of the first African-American ministers to address the issue head-on.
There are about 14 million children now without mother and father because their parents have died from the disease of AIDS. It is estimated that there'll be about 25 million people who have now died from the disease of AIDS. And by the year 2010, 40 million children. By the year 2025, maybe as many as 85 million children will be orphaned. That's about 3 times the total population of African Americans in the United States.
When we first started, feeling the major effects of this pandemic, one of the first things was that it was a taboo to talk about it. And by the time we started talking about it and raising awareness and all that, the damage was done.
Now, this cemetery is just over 15 years old, but we already chock-a-block full in this cemetery. We're even trying to see how to extend it. Actually, we've just extended that side because the level of burial, the level of people dying, there are times when you come in here, you will take more hours just coming in and going out more than the burial itself.
I noticed that.
Because everybody's here.
It is between the age of 15 and the age of 25 that is dying the most. And that is your energy. That is your tomorrow. That is your future. And we need to do something drastic about it. And I believe, here's the thing about it. If we go down to the children, we are saving tomorrow.
Kingsley is a wonderful young gentleman, and it's my pleasure to present him to you and ask him a few questions. Kingsley, where are your parents?
They was dead.
Your parents are dead?
Yes.
How long ago did they die?
In 1999.
Almost 8 years. You've been without your parents. And Kingsley, have you ever been tested for HIV yourself?
Yes.
And what did you discover when you were tested? Were you positive or negative?
Positive.
You were found to be HIV positive.
Yes.
To help children like Kingsley, in 2002, Blake created Save Africa's Children and raised over $4 million to support the building of schools and orphanages, the distribution of medical supplies, and the creation of AIDS awareness initiatives. It now reaches over 100,000 children affected by AIDS throughout sub-Saharan Africa.
I organized Save Africa's Children to help to assist in the caring for the children, and we're supporting about 325 orphan care programs on the continent of Africa now, in 23 nations with more than 100,000 children residing in those orphan care programs. African Americans must become for Africa what Jewish Americans have been for Israel. Since the days of the 60s and the Civil Rights Movement, as a race, we're kind of floating without purpose, without direction. And I think that if we unify around objectives like this, then not only will we be refined and enhanced, but it will bring about a tremendous impact on the continent of Africa.
I pray for you. You pray for me. I love you. And I need you. I want all of you.
What I like about Bishop Blake is that whatever he's doing, it's beyond Bishop Blake. When Bishop Blake is gone, whatever he's doing, the effects of what he's doing will remain for generations.
I come to help, but I come for my own sake also, because I cannot look myself in the face or my God in the face without knowing that I have done everything I could to help our brothers and sisters on the continent of Africa.
He's a spiritual trailblazer who has led his followers with a vision for victory, a conviction loaded with compassion, and a genuine love that transforms lives.
He is a man of the hour. God has placed him in this position. God has said to him, do this work well. And I believe that the greatest move that we're going to see in our lifetime is under the leadership of this man.
Bishop Blake is one of a kind. He's one of those people I'm saying, if God can give us more Bishop Blakes or like Bishop Blake, this world will be a better place.
Through him, I've learned, I've seen an example of greatness. Greatness is not in how high you think of yourself, but in how high you think of others.
We love him. We admire him. We respect him. Me as a man, I follow him, want to be like him in a lot of different ways.
People live through you, and people need you to live to be an example to them.
The same God that brought me thus far is able to carry me the rest of the way. Yes.
He's just a remarkable person. And I'm not saying this because I'm biased, but he is.
His example to me is made God's love real and the way God operates real.
I'm very proud to be his son, not just because I'm his son, but he has been a great man.
I don't feel that I'm all that special. I'm just another leader who loves people and who aspires to see good done for people on the earth.
Well, you may say, brother preacher, I've had it so rough. I've had so many problems. And it seems like it's been a long time. And I don't know whether I'm going to make it. But child of God, it's not going to be long. God's going to bring you out. Child of God, hold on for a while longer. It's going to work out all right. Don't you give up. Don't you throw in the towel. I see you coming out of it with a joyous shout of victory. I see you praising God on the other side of your trial. Hold on, child of God. It didn't come to stay. It came to pass. Tell your neighbor, neighbor, it didn't come to stay. It came to pass. I'm coming out with a shout of victory. Yeah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Oh, listen, I'm trying to stop, but I feel the power of the Lord in this place today. Some of you are in a trial. You're in a difficulty. You're trying to make your way out, but I dare you just to praise him. Praise him. Praise him. Glory, 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 glory. Glory, glory, glory. Glory, glory, glory. Tell two people you're going to make it. You're going to make it. It's going to be all right. You're going to make it. It's going to be all right. It won't be long. It won't be long. Oh, yeah. Hallelujah.
again.